Welcome to the Voice of Bold Business Radio, the show about ways to stay competitive in a changing market, break through business plateaus, and respond to the changing expectations of today's customers. Your host, Jess Dewell, is a rapid growth entrepreneur, consultant, and business advocate with a 20-year track record of business excellence. She candidly discusses how to achieve your growth strategy and realize your company's unfulfilled potential. Now, here's Jess.
Welcome to the Voice of Bold Business Radio. I am your host, Jess Dewell. You're in the right place for conversations about current needs that we as leaders face regarding technology, what it means to handle quickly changing markets, and customer expectations to boot. This program is about how to reach those short-term goals and increase confidence in long-term positioning. This is program 186. How do you anticipate changing customer expectations? The choice of your product over another depends more and more on the experience that you're providing customers. It's up to us to collect and mine data from our customers effectively to anticipate change and achieve our growth strategy. I'm the founder of CEO of Red Direction, and I bring you over 20 years of advising, consulting, and facilitating for growth strategy. Companies working closely with me learn to ask the right questions and to think effectively on their feet. I am your business advocate, specializing in working with companies at critical points in development to balance their growth with constraints found in leadership and in operations. All right, so the question, how do you anticipate changing customer expectations? Well, that's a really big open-ended question, and it's a question that I know at Red Direction we grapple with every single year. The clients of Red Direction grapple with this every single year because faster than ever before, technology is changing. The way that we interface and act and what that early adoption model looks like is so rapid that it makes sense in one sense that we feel the push to understand what's going on. Yet in another sense, it makes sense that we always feel like we're keeping up, like we are always behind the eight ball. We don't really know what's going on. And here's the thing. This concept of the playing field changing with big data and not big data, right? So Red Direction is a small company. Your company may be a small company. Even if you're in a corporate company, the access to big data may not be accessible to you in your role. And one of the ways that you in your role as a frontline person, as a middle manager, as an executive, as the strategic planner and implementer, the owner of the business, whatever the role is that you're holding in your organization, there is a way to use data around customer feedback and create customer feedback loops to help you anticipate changes in your role and how your role is impacted by what our customers are facing. And that's what today's program is about. I do, before we continue, want to just note that in the US, it is November 27th today, and that is Giving Tuesday across the United States. And what that means is that there are pushes from nonprofits everywhere to get you in the loop, to get you on board the programs that you follow and donate throughout the year. Donate today. So I want to just take this public service announcement and say, go out, take some action, donate to a cause that you believe in to help your community, to help your colleagues, to help humanity, and take advantage of that. You'll probably hear me say it next week for everybody that's in Colorado, because in Colorado, it's on a different day. So going with the flow, go out, donate. What I've done today is I've gone to Benevity on Twitter, retweeted one of their videos, mentioned Colorado Women's Education Foundation, and they have pledged to give $10 because I did those two things. $10 goes to CWEF just because I took that action. So it doesn't even have to be money out of your own pocket. All right. End of public service announcement. It's important to be involved in our community in any way that we can be. And I wanted to make sure that you know that it's an integral part of how we look at community beyond what we're doing in our organizations or in our non-work outside of work lives. All right, jumping back into this anticipating changing customer expectations. There are several reasons that we must anticipate change. The first is the fact that I alluded to it earlier. Technology is changing so fast, we are not exactly sure what our customers, whether they're businesses or individuals, are going to be facing or using, and how their worlds are changing because of technology, and maybe even because of other macro or micro events in the world and in the spheres that they are in. So when we recognize that technology is such an integral part, and we recognize that there are pressures outside of the way they use our product or service, then we can automatically expand the way we think. To expand, I shouldn't say expand the way we think. Let me change that. Expand the opportunity and the place for us to consider different information. Another is that as our needs change, right? There are sometimes we figure out what our growth strategy is, we figure out what our core product is, we know what our mission is, and then a company puts on blinders and they keep going and going and going. You've probably heard me talk about the company who comes to me, every couple of years and says, Jess, we're still not growing. And I said, what are you doing differently? And they say, nothing. And I'm like, point taken. Do you get it yet? And we just go with the flow on that. So when our blinders are on, even though we're staying true to our mission and true to our purpose, if we're forgetting outside data, like how our customers interact with us, how they use our product, we're missing out. The other concept is that especially, whether it's business to consumer and we're solving somebody's job to make their life easier between being at work and not being work, or working and doing other types of life activities. You've got that piece of it. You've also got people who have to do their jobs differently because they are facing change. They are facing different pressures. But because we're doing what we do so well and we forget to ask them, we're missing an incredible opportunity to anticipate how they're using our product. Is their use for our product changing, and how then do we know and keep track of what our opportunities are for future growth and an ongoing relationship with that customer? And the other piece is, that's so funny, I took a big sigh because I could list it. I'm going to stop at the three things here. The anticipation of change is all about understanding how to plan, what to plan, and then how to act and when to act and where to act. Thinking about that, understanding how those come together, which by the way will be different for each and every single one of you listening. And let's say you're listening to this and you pass this on to your colleague, and your colleague is in the same company. The way you put those things together will be different than the way that they put those things together, solely because the role that you're doing and the responsibilities that you have and your ability to impact and affect the growth strategy for your organization is different than the person that you're giving this program to listen to. And the reason I bring that up, oh, by the way, before I go back to the reason I bring that up, is because some of you are thinking, yeah, but the person I just gave this to is actually in the exact same position than I am. We have the same responsibilities. We have the same everything. What you don't have what you have that is different, okay? What you have that is different is the way you think, your approach to impacting the growth strategy for your company within the role that you're in now, as well as where do you want to go? Are you happy in this role? Are you aspiring to something different within your organization? Are you aspiring to something different in another organization or in another facet altogether, right? When that's the case, it automatically becomes different. And so how you use the information here will be different than somebody else's, because the way you weight it, the way you approach it, the impact to your workflow are all affected by the way you anticipate. All right, and I'm thinking about this concept of anticipation, moving to the next point. It made me realize that we, going back into that blinder mode, tend to forget to just say, hey, what are your growth goals? Hey, what are you doing? Hey, how's it going? In fact, we use the latter, how's it going? And we hear about the personal relationship and we're building a personal relationship. All right, that's great. And people sell to people. Yes, all right, all that applies. And unless you ask what they're doing in their role, unless you're able to switch gears and get beyond that connection to connection, there will be no more sales, or there will be no first sale. Because when we don't know what people are facing or how they're facing it, we don't know how we can truly help. So those of us who are out there in sales positions and you're thinking about relationship selling, yes. And this is something that you are wishing that everybody in your organization knew. Yes. People sell to people, and every person has a sales responsibility. Not to take away from the dedicated role that our sales teams and our marketing teams have, because that's different altogether. However, when we put in sales into every mindset and we say, I'm sitting around and at my desk, very full plate every day, processing incoming orders or making sure that invoices are paid, either one of those things, okay? In either one of those scenarios, we might think that that person has no impact on sales. Incorrect. The reason that those people have an impact on sales is they see who is reordering and has that information first. They see the types of companies, not just the fact that it's the same customer over and over again, but they see types of companies that are coming through. They see quantities and how much is there a renewal or a license fulfillment or whatever's going to be shipped out to be shipped out. Is it the same or is it different? So that person who's in that role, receiving those orders, and in this case, it was me because that's how I use this example. I can see those things. And it's not big data, but it's the data for my role. And I'm going to go back to that. We've got this concept of big data, and in a small organization, even in a large organization, that access to big data in a role where we're looking, there may be no direct correlation. Having information that we can use to better understand and come up with ideas that have a beginning, a middle, and an end, that we can take to somebody and say, hey, here's an opportunity to increase growth. Yes, I process the orders, and here's what I'm noticing, and this is what the opportunity is. And by the way, if something's missing, who calls them? Me. So I'm talking about them and I'm asking whoever I'm talking to, how's this product working? How is this actually helping you achieve your growth goals? When you take the initiative and do that, you have the most valuable information that mass data can give insights to, but it can't really direct, because what your customer tells you in return is the most important piece. The most important piece, we are using this because it solves this problem. Oh, great. Have you always used it this way, or is how you used our product changed? Simple questions that will allow us to take one step toward not only deepening the person-to-person connection, also asking the right questions to gather the information that will help us understand how our customers are using our product without a survey. Without mass stuff is great and it has its place. It's in those one-on-one moments that we're just doing our everyday job to spend an extra 5 minutes and ask those questions that we will get information. And so that's one example. I could be an account manager, and when I call up and tell my client the new stuff we can do for them on their account and what the deals are right now and how it might work and what features they're not using, that's typically how an account management conversation goes. Well, what if that account manager also took it one step further and said, so before even any of that stuff was shared, so how's it going? Maybe it's on a video, right? How's it going? What is our product doing best for you right now? How is it helping you achieve your success in your role? How is it adding to the growth of your company? And see what your contact says, because they know what's going on. You're the contact to them. This is a conduit, a way to connect people to people, understanding what's going on, information that we can bring in and then use through an internal knowledge base. Maybe that's just conversation. Maybe that's a database filled with information tagged and organized in different ways so that different queries can be run against it. Whatever it is, that feedback, the installation of those feedback loops will give you the edge, because for some reason, one, people, right? Our physiology, our fear factor is so high that we hate, in general, hate being rejected. And we have to overcome that concept of being rejected. And some of us, it's a risk thing. There's some action that is so risky that all of a sudden we're in this place of fear and we hate that risk, right? And I'm using the word hate here because it's inhibiting. And we don't, for whatever reason, we're not saying, are you still going to use us next year? We're saying, how are you using our product? So this mind shift of making sure and understanding, picking up the phone and talking to somebody we don't talk to very often, as well as picking up the phone and asking different questions of the people that we talk to on a regular basis, shifts it from not only the personal side of how we are doing, but the business side of how we are actually serving our customers. It's a novel concept to ask our customers, what is their growth strategy and what are they trying to accomplish in their role, and seeing how does that work? What could that be? You know, I know that there's a concept of being able to ask questions, and some of you are out there and you're saying, of course I do that already. Great. What are you doing with the information that you get? When you're doing something with the information that you get, you have the ability to share with other people, okay? And this is where it really becomes useful for marketing and sales. Marketing and sales use big data. They're using all of these analytics from all of these places, and they may be using some customer feedback. Now, what if we took that customer feedback and used it differently? And all of a sudden, here I am in a sales role, and across 3 months, I've been keeping track of the objections that I get, the reasons not to connect and sign a contract or buy a thing now, and I'm just keeping track of them. And it occurs to me, because I'm writing them down, by the way, this is my workflow, yours might be different. I write them down, and all of a sudden, I say all of a sudden, across a few months, I see a new one pop up and be repeated. There's a new objection, a new objection. So when we go into sales, we're anticipating objections and we're handling them before they start. Well, when there's an objection that we haven't faced before, that is an indicator that there is a change and that there is a pause necessary to be able to figure out what's changing. Is it the customer need? Is it that some other technology is trying to incorporate a feature or a service that we're providing and edge us out, right? That's the concept of a blue ocean. How do I take a market and expand it out? How do I look at potentially disparate places and where do they overlap that our service can do a good job and we can fulfill our mission, and we go after that market. We're all doing this. Every company is looking to increase their growth, typically internally by expanding market share or acquisitions, right? Through market share or new clients, as well as externally developing new markets and developing new products. So when we're thinking about that and we're thinking about all these different things and we're talking about anticipation, and here I am in a sales role, and maybe it's not even in a sales role. Maybe I'm at a conference and all of a sudden, right, in a period of 2 days, I'm just asking questions and hearing, and I hear something repeated in different ways. Well, as an active listener, which allows me to be a conscious thinker, then what can I do with that information? I can take it back and be like, hey, has anybody else heard variations of this? We come up with new objections to anticipate, but we also need to understand what those objections are and talk about them outside of our department and give them to somebody else in marketing, and give them to somebody else in product development, and give them to somebody else in customer service. Because the more correlations we have, the more indicators we have of what is the priority for developing and changing our product to adapt to what our customers need to stay relevant. Okay, with that in mind, we're going to take a short pause because I have 2 audience questions. Hashtag VBB Radio. Use it on Facebook, use it on YouTube, use it on Twitter. Eva is out there watching. She will bring them into the live show. Anything we don't answer during the live show, I will get recorded and we will share out in some capacity and tag you back so that you know, also using hashtag VBB Radio. All right, here's a question from Jody. This one came through the website, and this is a little different than the hashtag. You just email radio@reddirection.com. I now know my business goals for my role, but I have a hard time to connect them in the best way with my customers. What would you suggest I do? Oh, well, this is interesting. You know what I'm going to say? Maybe you'll know what I'm going to say. And it'll kind of be like a what? Or it's an oh duh. Okay, either one of those are appropriate. And that is, ask your customer what their growth strategy is. You know what your growth goals are. Ask your customers. Ask the people in those companies that you're talking to, what are your growth goals? Because if you know what their growth goals are, you have a better idea of what they're facing. And you're telling me in your case, I'm not sure how to tie those growth goals to a customer. Okay, well, ask them. And then also, these are conversations to be having internally in your organization. Once you know what your customers are facing, it helps understand how do you approach them, and when you're out talking or managing accounts or responding to emails or making phone calls or showing up at conferences or talking to strangers about whatever you're talking about, you understand what that growth goal is. And then internally, there's a different question, okay? The internal question is, what kind of growth is it? And what is the actual growth strategy? If I have a growth goal, is my growth strategy to increase the average customer contract size in a year? And that's how we're going to get growth this year. Or is it something like, I have to get X number of new contracts and deals to achieve this growth strategy? Okay, that's just two examples, and there are tons of ways for growth to occur. Usually, there's a mix. There's some sort of a mesh that a company has. So the question then is, well, so how are we planning on achieving that? Because what that means is, when we know not only what our growth goals are, but we also know the way in which this strategy is expected to be achieved, the path that we're going to go down, then we have the ability to go, okay, now I can decide, here's what my role is, here are the actions I have, here are the ways that I interface with customers, here are the ways I can support this growth plan, and then you begin to take action. So thank you, Jody. All right, here's another question from the website that came in. All right, I run a very small Dominic is saying, I run a very small business, but I need to grow my business and expand. What would be the best approach to expand my limited data to get more of the data I need to use to anticipate customer expectations? Okay, all right, Dominic, so I'm going to break this out into a couple of pieces. The first part is, thank you for telling me you're a small business. What I'm going to share with you applies to medium-sized businesses as well, and there are elements that will work for enterprise-sized organizations also. The second, okay, so the first part of this is getting more data. The easiest, quickest way to get the real data, the real time, is to show genuine interest in what your existing customers are facing and how they're doing what they're doing. Number one. Might sound repetitive, you've heard it now 3 times, but it's the truth. Ask the question, what are your growth goals? What are you doing to achieve those growth goals? How does my organization help you do that? Okay, it's that one-to-one. It is very much one-to-one. Now, the reason for that one-to-one then becomes scalable, because now when you hear trends, let's say you have 1,000 customers, okay? Small business, small amount of customers. You have 1,000 customers so far in whatever you're doing. And in that 1,000 customers, 120 of them have said something similar. And a different set of 200 said something different but similar. And maybe there's an overlap between those two groups with this third thing, okay? Now you have, out of your 1,000 customers, you have how they're using your product, what they're using it for, and how it helps them achieve their growth. You also heard what they're facing in 3 different areas. Well, depending on your mission and your vision, depending on what your current priorities are, will determine how you are communicating out to the rest of the world to acquire more clients that are doing what they're doing. Idea number 1. That's the first part. And I say idea number one. So that's the first part. The second part of this is anticipating the customer expectations. Well, some people would say, well, 1,000 customers is not enough to know what's going on. Well, yeah, maybe from an ad buy perspective. Yeah, maybe from a big data perspective, but 1,000 customers is more than enough to be able to figure out, how do I engage and engage effectively? What does the marketing team say? What does the sales team say? What does the customer service team say to elicit not only the best possible response in service, also the best possible opportunity to make them feel genuinely cared about, in line, and you're delivering the service within the value set that you have said is important, as well as you are focused on being able to recognize, here are the 3 points that we know are going to help us with our growth this year. This is what we're focusing on and figuring out. Then when those come up, they're internal, I'm going to call them experiments. I know business people don't like experiments, but you know what? Life is an experiment. We try something and it works or it doesn't work. Now, an idea with a beginning and a middle and an end really support making sure that we have what we have, making sure that what we need is what we've got, right? And doing everything that we need to do in that capacity. That said, understanding what people are saying, they may not realize that your product can actually help them in the future with a tweak here or a tweak there or a different communication strategy. So listen, genuinely connect and record the data, because when it's all in one person's head, it's no use. It has to be out of a person's head, has to be out of every person's head and into a place that is useful, searchable, and that can be used as a reference point for different conversations. All right, thank you for those 2 questions. Remember, radio@reddirection.com, #VBB radio. You are listening to Program 186, How Do You Anticipate Changing Customer Expectations? We'll be back after this.
You're listening to the voice of Bold Business Radio. In every program, we share stories, tips, and concepts that benefit short-term goals and increase confidence in long-term positioning. Stay current and receive programs to continue sparking ideas about growth strategy by subscribing to the program at voiceofboldbusiness.com. Now, back to Jess.
Awesome possum. The thing is, we're talking about anticipation. We're talking about customer expectations. We're talking about growth strategy. Those 3 things are so incredibly important because they are tied together. Well, I guess if you can see me on video, I had 2 fingers, but I listed 3 things. So really we have 3 things intertwined. And wow, when we're asking the question, what's your growth strategy? What are the challenges that you're facing? That tells us what's happening in other industries. When we have that genuine connection and we genuinely listen, and then we can actually figure out how to better serve and even best serve the clients that we have, we can increase our messaging in those capacities to attract the clients that we can best serve through other venues. All right. I already mentioned this concept of objections hold clues about customers' needs and wants. And objections may not be direct, right? They may be indirect. They may be kind of like avoidance. Or subject changers, or just they could be flat out no's. They could, nope, this just isn't going to work. This isn't going to work. Well, it's pretty interesting when we think about that, because objections, there's a reason for that. And one, talking to the right person to be able to handle the objection may be, right, the gatekeepers out there. We all are a gatekeeper here or there. And so maybe it's a matter of, how do we better interface with the gatekeepers to open that door? And by the way, genuinely listening and consciously being involved and asking those questions and making those contacts will help that. So in these objections, and I'm using objections and coming back to that specifically because I'm going to go back to a time in my past when I was still at the e-commerce company, okay? My first company. And she, and I say she, now I'm talking about myself in the third person. What is that? one of the things that would happen is I would get calls, right? Remember, I acquired other companies for Digital River, and then running all of them, I heard objections across all of them. Well, it was interesting to hear, I'm not going to use this service because of this, but I'm going to use this one over here because of that. They're all the same company. They're all the same company with a different name. And so when you think about that and being able to go, I wonder what that's all about. Does it really matter? Especially when the objection was not cost. Because really on the outside, the biggest differentiator between all of those product choices was the cost, the investment to the customer. And so when other things, are happening in relationship, to objections that are outside of price, my little ears would turn on. And this was, by the way, an acquired skill. It didn't occur to me. I just would like roll my eyes and be like, pick whichever one you want to pay for. And then I was like, wait a second, that's a little aloof. And wait a second, that's not very service oriented. And wait a second, what are they really saying to me? And before I tell you what they're going to say to me, I'm just going to do a quick shout out. Hi, Rebecca. Glad you're joining us on Facebook. Really excited to have you be part of the program today. And so then we've got this, going back to the story, it made me realize there's something more here. This is where ultimately when you dug into, well, they had this feature that worked in this way. Okay, well, everybody had this feature, but it was in this way that they needed. Well, guess what we found out? We found out that, by the way, all our customers were the same back then in that scenario. Across all of those platforms, we all of them worked with software developers. Small and medium-sized software development, application development companies. So we have this concept, right? And I'm hearing this and I'm like, oh. So really what it turned out to be was, it wasn't even necessarily the checking the box or how the technical setup of the implementation of the feature that they wanted was. It was because they liked the way that they were talked to. And every single one of these companies had different people, and they all talked differently, and they all thought about things differently. And each of the teams had worked together long enough that each of the teams was very cohesive and talking the same way. So we had 5 different ways of talking. And so the 2 takeaways. One was, it's not always about price when they say it, because we have culture. How do they feel like they're genuinely connecting to you? Part 1. Part 2 of this is something different. It is the fact that we have the ability to blame something as a diversion to what's real. And so I have a book that I went and I dug up, and it's John Maxwell. It's called How Successful People Think. And I was preparing for this the other day, and I went and I dug this up because there are 2 things that come out of this, right? There are 2 things that come out of this story. The first is the right reason equals the right result. The right reason equals the right result. The thing is, the right reason might equal a result we don't like, but it's still the right result. Contemplate that for a second. When we don't like the result, we have the ability to change the way we're doing it. Sometimes what we forget is to go back to the very beginning and understand what was the intention of the actual reason for doing whatever we did to get the result ultimately that we didn't like. So go back to the beginning, right? I'm thinking about this, and that's what we had to do. We had to figure out and work backwards. Well, if it's not about price, and it's really not about these features, and really there's an easier way to do it than what they're choosing to do or how they're choosing to implement, but they don't want to change, or they're making this choice no matter what. We were getting the right result, but we were asking the wrong question. So something to consider in that capacity, the way people think. And that was something that he shared as a starting point. So to expand your own thinking, to look at those objections, to hear what's actually not being said as well as what is being said, and be able to look at the result versus what's being said, right? There's a gap. If it's not the same and they don't line up, there's a gap. Go back. How do we close that gap? What did we miss? The other thing that I want to think about here is how to think, right? We all have this concept in our head. If I said to you, Scott is a good thinker, all of a sudden, by the way, he's tipping his hat behind the scenes. So I just wanted to do a call out there. I love that. Scott is a good thinker. Well, what you think is a good thinker is different than what I think is a good thinker, which is what Scott is. It's going to be different than what Scott thinks is a good thinker. So how do we define good thinking, right? We know what good thinkers look like. We can even pull up a concept of how we would describe a good thinker. And I took it one step further for you, and I broke it down into a few skills. When we apply these skills to the way that we're thinking and the information that we have, whether it's objections or analyzing conversations or figuring out what questions to ask, how do we think well? How do we do good thinking? Well, the first is to act a plan. You're just going to start asking questions, right? You're going to start asking questions, figuring out, where am I listening? Where am I not? Am I genuine? Am I not? And being able to recognize some of those pivotal pieces. Within that, there are some skills, and John Maxwell and I agree on a few. So you'll hear some of these are mine, and some of these are from John Maxwell's book, How Successful People Think. So the first is, when to be a good thinker, we employ and we engage dimensionality. What that means is we receive input from useful and potentially contrary places to gather information and viewpoints. Dimensionality is the whole spectrum. And not only do we need to have people in that spectrum, we need to have feedback, we need to have data from our phone calls and conversations, as well as analytics data. So dimensionality, how do we use what's available to us? Because if we're going to take the time to have the conversations, and we're going to take the time to talk to each other about what we're hearing in these conversations, and we're going to put it someplace in a collective place that can be analyzed over time, and we don't use it, we are missing out. Another skill that goes in, that is what good thinkers do, is having the ability to focus, right? Okay, this is what I'm hearing, this is what I'm seeing, this is what I think. But how do I take all of my energy, how do I take all of my thoughts, and how do I put them into a place so that I can look at what I'm hearing with immense focus without getting distracted, right? My brain, in almost every single thing, I call myself a circular thinker, all right? And I'm figuring out, to this day, how do I optimize? And I'm saying figuring on purpose, because the concept to figure out how you think is important. I know I'm a circular thinker. So when I'm in my office and I get an email and it says, "Hey, Jess, I'm so excited. This just happened in my business. We got that big client that we wanted to have landed, and they signed the contract today." And so here I am writing this back, and then I'm like, hey, I want to see who this is. So I might go look online at the company so that I have a better response to give to the person who sent me the email. When I go to look at that client, or that client's new client, okay? When I go look at that company to be able to add something useful to the email that says thank you, I might go, oh, they do such and such. I needed that such and such. So I go over to Amazon, or I go to my email and I make some notes, right? Or my note program to make some notes or do some research or just get the thing that I realized I needed that was reminded by there. And then, by the way, this is all at my desk. And then I'm like, oh, hey, it's been a little while since I took a break. Well, before I send this email, I'm going to go take a short walk around my office, maybe refill my tea, so I have the ability to be present when I answer, because I know I'm not present. Well, then I go get the tea and I find somebody and have this great conversation, which, by the way, sparks an interest. So I'm able to come back, write the email I want, immediately go to the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing. So for me, circular thinking is actually a type of focused thinking, and I'm optimizing that. Where are the points that I am unfocused along that path? Because I have to work in letting my subconscious and the processing catch up to what's actually in my brain to have the best response. Some of you out there are quick thinkers, and you just know. You can just make a decision and go. Well, I'm circular thinking all the time, so people think I'm a fast thinker. I'm really not a fast thinker. It takes a while. When you lay something on me, I can have an immediate response. I also need to walk away and have a secondary response, because that secondary response will not only be more meaningful for me, it'll be more genuine in my connection, because I understand how my brain works and I want to show up that way. So focused. How do you think? What are you doing? All right, another one is joy, right? I love being delighted, as do you. We like to have smiles on our faces. We like to do things that are easy and fun, and easy because they're fun, or hard things that are easier done because they're fun, right? Whatever that is, that joy. And in fact, take it, oh, here you go, right? There's my circular thinking. You just heard it in that pause. Taking a pause to actually just sit outside, or to take a walk for taking a walk, not to actually move your blood during a short break so that you can get exercise while you're taking a break. What if you just went and you walked down the sidewalk and you just saw, right? This concept of joy. How do you give yourself space to have joy and focus and dimensionality? Now the list goes on. I'm going to stop with those three and be able to say those are three of the things that make up good thinkers like Scott. And then, and then here we've got this concept, right, of thinking. How are we working? And we have a question that came in from Marta. I know that customers have different expectations. How do I prioritize their expectations, knowing that customers don't always speak their minds? The first thing I'm going to say is ask more questions. Ultimately, ask more questions to anticipate change, to anticipate customer needs, to anticipate their changing needs requires a dialogue. And in that dialogue, you can find out not only what they're saying, ask questions to see what they're not saying and see if it can be said, right? Sometimes they can't tell us, sometimes they don't know, but we can figure that out. One of those two things. And then we don't necessarily get to prioritize them in our role, right? Depending on what our role is, we may not be part of the strategic team. So those of you listening that are part of the strategic team, hear me out. There is the strategy, the growth strategy is held by a certain group that must communicate on a regular basis to everybody else. And when everybody else knows what that is, how that works, then and only then can each role figure out what is their impact by the actions that they're taking and change their actions. By the way, that also works in terms of the strategic thinking for what we're trying to do in relationship to our customers. So we're getting all of this stuff. Maybe our role is to understand there's a pattern, and that's our beginning. We're looking for patterns, changing patterns, new things we haven't heard before from the customers that we're talking to. And then once we have enough of that, we actually are looking at the system, because we know the typical things that we're always asked, but now we've got this new thing. This is the middle. We've got the stuff we know, and we've got this new stuff. What does that look like when we put it together? Does our product actually do this new thing? How did we go from this old thing to this new thing that's occurring? What is that trigger? What are they facing? Goes back to, what are you facing in your business, right? So being able to think about that, that's the middle. And then the end is, once you've got it, you take the beginning and the middle, you come up with an idea. Oh, well, this feature could be adjusted in this way. Well, it doesn't matter if you're in customer service. It doesn't matter if you're in marketing. It doesn't matter where you're at. It matters that you then give it to the right person. So you take that and you are having this beginning, this middle, and this end. And hopefully your company has that right person kind of figured out to collect these ideas and it might be many people depending on what the idea is, what the solution is, who would spearhead that. Just because we have the idea doesn't necessarily mean we're going to do the idea. But when we do a beginning and a middle and an end, people see that we've thought along the way. And remember, we're doing the role that we're in for the role that we're doing now to impact and have growth and success here. We're also looking forward. What is that next? What are the skills we need for the next step in our career? What are the skills that will allow us to do the next job well that we are going after? Because we must be developing those skills as well. So once you hand it off, that might be it. Now, the person who's collecting all of these ideas actually has probably an entirely different role, an entirely different set of things to wait. How often am I hearing these different things? How do I double check this? What's my dimensionality? What's my focus? And how do I make sure I align that to not only our growth strategy, but our current priorities and our long-term priorities? And then how do I present that in a way that will allow decisions to be made about what to do? So it's a team effort, and it's different people in different roles doing different things, everybody thinking in their own role. So thank you for that, Marta. All right, here's another one. This question is from John. What percentage of time should I spend on just gathering, analyzing, and sharing data? Because I'm already overworked already, right? I'm already overworked. Well, I get that. The thing is, when we take the time to have the conversation, we're gathering data. We're already doing something with that data. When we put down that phone, we're doing some sort of a task for this client. We are taking some sort of an action to figure out what the next step is, right, in our CRM or whatever the case may be, to figure out what the follow-up is, what are the next steps, whatever that checklist is. It's just another checklist. Just one more check box to put in your checklist. And yes, you're already overworked. Here's the thing. What if in this one more checkbox, what if with writing down the key pieces, whether it's an objection, whether it's what a growth strategy is, whether it's the problems that they're facing, pick one thing, ask every customer that for a month and see what you get. 30 days, and I'm hoping you're talking to more than one customer a day, so at least 30 inputs will divulge patterns. It will be what you expected, it will be what you didn't expect. In either case, it's good to know, because we still have to go into this good thinking concept and use our dimensionality, use our focus, use our joy to make sure that we're thinking about this and aligning it to a bigger thing. Because being overworked is one thing, forgetting to work on yourself as a person and on your role, and owners and leaders and executives, right, on the business and part or all of the business entity that you are responsible for. That on part is often left behind when we're overworked. And that on part is the thing that can make us less overworked, more effective. And so we might feel like our work doesn't change, our levels don't change, but we do see changes in growth. So I appreciate all of the questions that we've had today. If they keep coming in, remember, we will answer them after the fact and we will get them back out. All right. I tell you what, we have come to the end of the show. So I'm going to go back to the very beginning. How do we anticipate changing customer expectations? The answer to that is ask the people that you talk to when you're at work, maybe internally too, but the people you interface at other companies in other ways, customers, your customers. What are you facing right now? What are the big challenges in the role that you're in right now? What makes our product useful to you right now? Asking that question will yield amazing results and begin a different kind of data collection that can't come from analytics, that can't come from big data and trends, but it comes from an intention and a person-to-person connection. You will find program notes at the Voice of Bold Business Radio, program P186. That's voiceofboldbusiness.com/P for program 186. You may also search the site, How Do You Anticipate Changing Customer Expectations? I will link to John Maxwell's book. I'm also going to link to a book about stillness that I didn't have a chance to talk about today, but it did show up in terms of creating a space. So you will have 2 book resources in addition to the breakdown of what you'll hear in the program. Now it's your turn. Questions are great. Conversation is great. It's time for you to tell us what you think by rating this program, by rating the Voice of Bold Business Radio, and continuing the conversation. Using iTunes, iHeartRadio, YouTube, whatever platform you are watching and listening from, go there, give us a rating, give us a comment, use hashtag VBBRadio. Because whatever your preferred listening platform, and because whomever you send this to, by the way, sending this out would be a way to continue and share this conversation. Let's keep it going. Let's define what leading today means, because you're learning from my experiences. And when I receive emails like the one I described earlier, I learn from yours. Let's use what we're hearing, what we have not experienced necessarily directly the same as what we hear on this program, and use it practically as part of our focused, joyous, dimensional thinking. And consider, What can you do in your role today to anticipate changing customer expectations?
The voice of Bold Business Radio gives you insights about how to achieve your company's growth strategy. Use hashtag BBBRadio or email us at radio@reddirection.com to ask questions and share your experiences. Add your voice to the conversation. Together, we define what being an effective leader means today. Special thanks to the Scott Treatment for technical production. Thank you for joining us.